So AC asks, how can traditionally negative tarot cards like the Seven of Swords or the Devil be interpreted in a positive light? Should they be read using their reversed meanings? This is such a great question. And I have like the perfect deck to answer it with because I'm a self-indulgent brat. But let's answer this question using my deck because I took this into account when I created this deck, actually. So, number one, I would say that cards that have a more shadowy meaning are more shadowy by default. So let's start there. And I'll explain how I navigated this actually in the guidebook of my deck. But let's assume that a card like the Tower, the Devil, the Ten of Swords, the Seven of Swords, the Five of Swords, the Five of Pentacles, these cards have a shadowy foundational starting place. They're starting from a more difficult interpretation. So that is their default setting. Whereas a card like the Nine of Cups, the Ten of Cups, the World, these cards have a default setting that is much more positive. So this deck is in order. Mostly because there's my Queen of Earth. Where's my King? They somehow got reversed. Anyway, I keep this one in order. But how I approached this in my guidebook, because I'm not somebody that really reads reversed cards. Sometimes I do, like I play with it, but it's not my home base. So let's look at the card you mentioned, which was the Seven of Swords, because that feels relevant. Okay, there's Seven of Air in my deck, but same. Okay, so here in this card, in the story of this deck, Mystic, who is we're going to be slippy because we're linen, but let me just do this. Okay, so Mystic is on a quest. They're doing a job. They're on a journey. But they get distracted because they see all these little acorns on the ground, and Mystic is hungry. So a little bit distracted. And behind the tree here, so there's actually like a rope on the ground. You can see there's a trap ready to be sprung on poor Mystic. So there is a situation you're walking into, maybe unaware, where something shady is going on or something isn't what it seems. Maybe, and sometimes what's happening is we're looking at a situation and we're making assumptions, and that's not what's going on. So there's that layer to the Seven of Swords too. But the way I approach this in my guidebook, if we go to the guidebook for the Seven of Air, I will read you verbatim what it says. So I'll read you the story bit. So it says, Mystic knew the castle was just around the next bend. Feeling a burst of optimism and confidence that they had done the right thing, Mystic paused to nibble on some delicate acorns that had fallen from the oak trees that lined the path. Unfortunately, the treats distracted Mystic, who didn't notice the trap that had been set by the dark knights lurking nearby. So so I do in this guidebook have upright and reversed meanings, right? The upright meaning is you or someone close to you isn't being entirely honest or straightforward. You're not telling the whole story, or you're refusing to see what lies beneath the surface. What truth are you avoiding? And then I have a section that says, right after that, it says, to get back on track. So to get back on track, lift your gaze and look the truth in the face, then deal with it, okay? But in the reversed, I have it written like this. There are times in life when it's important to carve out the path that is right for you, even if others expect something entirely different. Don't shy away from owning your unmasking. Stand in your truth and your power and boldly face your future. Own this freedom. You've earned it. There's a little bit of more of a rebellious, positive interpretation to my reversed interpretation of this card, because its natural default setting is to be more difficult. My to get back on track section shows up in the upright. But if we go to a card that is traditionally positive, just to show you the example, if I go to the Ten of Water, for example, which we know is obviously a positive card, the Ten of Cups, happy, good times here. If I go to the Ten of Water, do y'all want the story? I feel like I'm going to tell you the story anyways. Okay. Mystic remained at the sparkling lilac tree, and the more times they spent at the lilac grove, the more friends they made. Over time, these friends became Mystic's chosen family. The rabbits, the foxes, the bear, the shy little hedgehog, and especially Umbra, the gray wolf. The lilac grove had become a safe place where they fully and finally belonged. In a moment of perfect joy and peace, Mystic finally removed the ruby necklace, hanging it on a nearby branch. Mystic was home. Now, the upright, obviously, there's so much to be grateful for. You've built a life that is full of opportunity, so I won't belabor you with the entire thing. But in the reverse, there's conflict brewing with you and those closest to you. Someone isn't meeting expectations, but those expectations may not be fair or realistic. To get back on track, ask yourself if you're trying too hard to aim for perfect bliss and missing opportunities for imperfect happiness. Recognize what you have before you lose it. So I moved that to get back on track to the reversed meaning piece. And so what I've done with this deck is I've acknowledged that some decks some cards have a starting point that is more positive, and some have a starting point or default setting that is more shadowy or difficult. And so that to get back on track advice shows up in wherever the difficulty is, upright or reverse. So when you say, how can traditionally negative tarot cards like the Seven of Swords be interpreted, or the Devil be interpreted in a positive light, you then look to, if this card is showing up in a positive way for me, which is outside of its default setting, whether because the card is physically upside down on your table or because you have gotten that, maybe it's in a positive position. Like maybe it's you've done a spread and you get the Devil. Let's actually pull that card. You get the Devil in a blessings position. Okay. So the Devil card sits in a position of blessing as you are doing this reading. And you're like, well, how the heck is the Devil a blessing? Let's go into the guidebook and see. I don't remember what I said half the time, so this is also entertaining for me. I'm sorry if it's like really dumb, but I can't help it. Okay, so here I would look to the Devil because remember, it's upright. It's a default shadowy. So if I get this in a positive card spread position, like what is today's blessing, I'm going to look to, in my guidebook, I'm going to look to the reverse to look for that interpretation that might flip it a little bit. You're awakening to the reality of your situation and you're ready to break the cycle. Your self-awareness brings clarity and the promise of freedom. You're ready to leave behind the negative patterns you've been stuck in. There's your blessing. So if you've got a good tarot guidebook to work with that will help you do that, that will help you look for if this card is typically negative, you could, if you have a good guidebook, look for some guidance or inspiration from how that guidebook handles the reversal. Now, not all guidebooks are going to handle reversals the same way. Not all readers handle reversals the same way. So, for example, some readers might handle a reversal. The Devil card is always negative no matter what. And they handle a reversal as whether the energy is blocked, whether it's like maybe emphasized as extra negative. So, what you've got to decide as a tarot reader is how are you going to approach the card's default setting, its default interpretation, and how you will look at it differently in the cases where it's clear it is meant to be positive, either because of the spread position, the question you asked. So if you ask a question like, what is going to get me out of this funk I'm in? And you pull the Devil, you're frustrated because you're like, well, that's a negative card. So every single person who works with cards has to, for themselves, determine, how am I going to handle that? Whether or not I read with physically reversed cards, how am I going to handle it when I ask a question or have a spread position that implies this is a positive card for me, but I pull a negative card? And so that's why I'm sharing my method, because that's what works for me. So what works for me is to look to instead, kind of, let's go back to Justin's earlier question about how do we not read predictably? How do we keep our power, et cetera, et cetera? We can ask ourselves that question. Well, if this is a blessing, you just literally ask yourself the question, how could the Devil card be a blessing? How could negative patterns be a blessing? Oh, maybe it's not about the pattern. Maybe it's about the fact that I'm finally breaking free of the pattern. And you have this dialogue with yourself where you explore, what is it telling me? And you can do that organically, or you can make a little bit of a rule for yourself for how you're going to handle it. So in my case, if I get a traditionally negative card in a positive position, for me, I would go to my own personal reversed interpretation, such as it is, and look at the more positive way to look at that card. But sometimes not. Like sometimes the Tower is the Tower is the Tower, and that's an intuitive decision. Like maybe, yes, the Tower is still coming down and that sucks, but maybe the blessing is that it's going to be good for me in the long run. You know what I mean? So some of this again comes back to self-trust, following what you feel in your body, in your gut, in your mind, or in your heart as you're working with your cards. What does this feel like it's telling me? And trusting the answer. Because I think a lot of times we're looking for a rule set that will 100% be so crystal clear without any of our own input. And card reading always involves, to some degree or another, our own input. But when I'm reading for myself, I like working with the guidebooks. So naturally, when I made my own deck, I built the guidebook to function the way that I would want it to function if I pulled that card in that context. So for me, Unicorn's Journey Tarot does that exactly the way I need it to do it. And obviously, because I got to write it and create it, it does that perfectly for me. But it's going to depend. And not all guidebooks will follow that formula. So it's also maybe considering what deck you're working with. If you do work with guidebooks, make sure the guidebook's in alignment with the way you want to work with the card, or don't work with the guidebook if it's not in alignment with you, that kind of thing. Yeah, Sean says, I think the deeper your understanding of the cards becomes, it becomes natural and organic to do this. I agree. It's easier as you get more comfortable with your relationship with what every single card means. It's why I'm so passionate about building your own bond with the card and understanding for yourself what it's going to mean, because that's the whole point behind this. Was like, I wanted to guide people toward building their own personal relationship with the meaning of every card, because once it's personal for you, once you know for yourself what that card's going to mean, it will open up so many possibilities for how you read. It will give you such a strong jumping off point, because if you're just reading it the way you've been taught to read it, that's valid and it works, but it's missing that personal layer where it's going to like feel true for you. Yeah, AC says that was exactly the type of situation I was asking this question for, having a negative card in a blessing type of position. That is so helpful. Thank you. Oh, you're welcome.